I'll do one thing. The previous paragraph we'll just summarize and then we'll go to the next one. Okay. Oneness. This unity of Purusha and Prakriti, that means spirit and matter, exists in essence. It is always there. Okay. Even if you are in the lower plane of consciousness, it is there, but you don't see it. The unity of Purusha and Prakriti. That means the divine is there even in the physical world. But in all the planes of existence, it works itself out in a varying duality. The duality goes on changing. At the lowest level, Prakriti is absolutely dominant, force. Okay, matter is full of force. But there seems to be no consciousness. As you keep rising, consciousness increases and force starts becoming not less, but held back. Okay, like in the when you go to the spiritual plane of consciousness in the higher mind, you don't seem to have any force. You are in an immutable condition. Immutable means no action at all. Force is there, but it is held back. Okay? That's what he's saying. Purusha and Prakriti are inversely proportional to each other. As consciousness increases, force goes into the background. As force increases downwards, consciousness seems to go into the background. Okay? It's very clear to understand this because in the physical world, in matter, there is force, but there doesn't seem to be any consciousness. At the higher level, when you are going into the higher mind, element mind, the consciousness is absolutely open, but you don't seem to have any power. Okay, so it's only when you go to the third level they are equal, power and consciousness, Chit Shakti. Purusha and Prakriti are inversely proportional to each other. At the lowest level of matter, Prakriti is all dominant and Purusha is apparently absent, potentially present. He apparently absent but potentially present. Above, in the silence of the mind, in the self, Purusha is dominant and Prakriti is held back in a static, waiting condition. In other words, in the self, Purusha, consciousness, holds Prakriti as prisoner. And in matter, Purusha is imprisoned in the perennial movement of the Prakriti. This is what he's saying. Okay? Purusha is not unconscious and mechanical. Okay? He lives in the delight of the static force in the self, but it's also taking delight in the playful. Just one second. Yeah.
Rangada, we have not been able to hear you.
Okay, now you'll hear me, now. When I'm near the phone, you'll hear me. You can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, because on the phone, I have to be near the phone, otherwise you will not. Okay, Purusha is not unconscious and mechanical. Okay, he lives in the delight of static force in the self, but it is also taking delight in the playful activity of Prakriti in the lower hemisphere of the multiplicity. The divine is there, but you don't see him. But there's a difference in the universal and the individual levels. In the lower hemisphere's ignorance, man is conscious only of his body-mind life. When we are here, we are conscious only of our body, our vital and our mind. But sometimes, rarely aware of our immutable self. This is because of his limitation and his ignorance. But the divine in the higher hemisphere has no such debilitating limitation and is fully aware of his potential play in the status as well as the silent passivity in the infinite play of cosmic Prakriti. The ancient Indian philosophical dispute between spirit and matter, between God and the world, between being and becoming, does not in any way concern the eternal who is equally at ease with both Purusha and Prakriti. This is what he said in the previous paragraph. Now we will start reading the next one, and that is the active force of conscious being. Okay. So we'll read the whole para first. It is not a very big para. I'll read the whole para and then we'll. An active force of conscious being, such it, okay? An active force of conscious being, which realizes itself in its powers of self-experience, its powers of knowledge, will, self-delight, self-formulation, with all their marvelous variations, inversions, conversions of energy, even perversions, is what we call Prakriti or nature. In ourselves as in the cosmos, the individual as well as the cosmos, in the universe. This play is there in both. But behind this force of variation is an eternal equilibrium of the same force in an equal unity which supports impartially, governs even as it has originated the variations and directs them to whatever aim of its self-delight the being, the Purusha, has conceived in his consciousness and determined by its power, will or power of consciousness. That is the divine nature into unity. That is the divine nature into unity, with which we have to get back by our yoga of self-knowledge. We have to become the Purusha, Satchidananda, delighting in a divine individual possession of his Prakriti and no longer mental beings subject to our egoistic nature. For that is the real man, the supreme integral self of the individual, and the ego is only a lower and partial manifestation of ourselves, through which assisted and preparatory experience becomes possible and is for a time indulged. It allows, the consciousness allows that identification with body mind. But this indulgence of the lower being is not our whole possibility. It is not the sole or crowning experience for which we exist as human beings, even in this material world. So, we'll do one thing. I'll read out the summary and then we'll go into the details. Yeah. So, he's saying, Sat Chit Ananda has consciousness and force. Satchidananda has consciousness as well as force, Chit as well as Sakti. It manifests itself, expresses itself, and realizes itself through its powers of will and delight in a cosmic infinity of unending multiplicity. Let's go a little into detail to see this. Why is he using so many verbs? It manifests itself. Okay? And when it is manifesting itself, it also expresses itself. It brings in its details. This is what I am. And realizes itself through its powers of will and delight in a cosmic infinity of unending multiplicity. It goes on creating and then finally governing. Okay? It also governs what it is doing. To do this, it employs what are the methods it uses to manifest itself and create all the multiplicity. It uses the power of variation. Okay? It uses the power of variation. That means the possibility of making many things. Inversion. It also uses inversion. That means it makes itself the opposite of what it is. Inversion. Conversion. It also makes things static. Okay? And conversions of energy. Even perversions. It becomes the opposite of itself. That's why you have the dualities in the physical world. So the consciousness has got all these powers. Power of variation, power of inversion, power of conservation, conversions of energy, even perversions. All these things the consciousness can do. This is the cosmos, and we call it Prakriti or nature. When all these things are happening in the physical world, we see contradictions. We see constant variation. We see constant change. These are the powers of the Prakriti. This Satchidananda does all this universally as well as individually. This is interesting because what happens in the physical world is also happening at the individual. But the individual can raise himself up to a high level, but the the cosmos cannot do that at the same speed. The speed of evolution in the cosmos is much, much, much slower than the power of evolution in the individual. He can escape and go to higher levels of consciousness, but Prakriti has can't do that. It has to do that over millions of years, slowly. This is what he's saying. This is a cosmos, and we call it Prakriti or nature. This Satchidananda does all this universally as well as individually, but allowing and ensuring the success of this activity is a static power of stability and silence. The Purusha, which is absolutely silent on top, allows and permits the movement to take place in the physical world. It's the conception. It's because the poet has got a conception of what he wants to write that it becomes possible for him to express it on paper. That's exactly what Srilva is saying here. Allowing and ensuring the success of this activity is a static power of stability and silence. This immutability, but when it is silent, it is not tamasic. That means it is not that it doesn't have any power. It is power which is held back and used as necessary in the physical world. It is power held back, but ready to leap into action. It's a dynamic stability, not a passive stability. This status is impartial. One, not only originating the dynamic activity, but also governing it and channeling it into whatever aim of delight of existence it intends to achieve. It is the Purusha, silence and status, that permits Prakriti to execute its own aims. So in the physical world, Prakriti is going on creating things, but it is with the permission of the Purusha. Consciousness is allowing force, his own force, to do what it wants to do. It seems to be doing independently and also without consciousness, but actually consciousness is there at the background, allowing these things to happen. So in the individual also, when you become conscious of your and you want to make yourself much better, you realize that all that you have been doing, all the wrong things that you have been doing, okay, so-called wrong things, it is actually the conscious your soul that has allowed you to do that so that you get experience. It is like only when you make a mistake will you realize that that is not to be done, and you realize what the error was. So that is why the to put it in a very dramatic manner, the soul allows. Okay, are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Can,
can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
okay, okay. Because suddenly my phone started doing something else. That's why I asked. So this is, you realize that only when you make a mistake, you know what the real thing is. So that is why your soul allows you to do everything. It allows you to, I'll put it in a very moralistic way, it allows you to drink and smoke, and then you realize that drinking is going to ruin your health, and then you don't do it anymore, and you also stop smoking because it will give you cancer of the lungs. Okay, so this is what, that is why the soul is allowing all these things to happen. But then when it realizes that it's harmful, it withdraws its permission. That is exactly what the process is. So in the Jnana Yoga, we have to realize and unite ourselves with the divine Prakriti, Para Prakriti. The lower Prakriti is the physical world where it seems to be mechanical action and unconscious action. But at the higher level, that same Prakriti, the Divine Mother, she reveals herself as absolutely conscious and full of force. But we have to also realize and become Purusha. Purusha is pure consciousness, and the father and the mother, if you want. The father is the one that allows things to happen, he is consciousness, and the mother is the one that creates the child, and the child is the universe. Okay? So we have to realize both. The spiritual people are realizing only Prakriti and reject, sorry, the ascetic, okay, is realizing only the Purusha, consciousness, and rejects Prakriti. But Srimati is saying we have to realize both. And how can you do that? By going to the third level. The individual has to take delight in possessing his own nature. When we, at our level, we think we are in charge of, we are in control of our body, mind, life. Actually, we are not. Then when you go to the spiritual level of consciousness, you realize that you are not in at all in control, and you also don't have any power to do anything. The body, mind, life is acting just like universal acting is acting mechanically and unconsciously. Then third level you go, you can possess your own being. Okay? You can have control over your own body and your own mind and your own body, and making it into the image of the divine nature, para prakriti, and not letting it linger in the body, mind, life, which is the apara prakriti. The lower prakriti is your body, mind, life, or the universal nature. Lower nature, where ego, limitation, and ignorance abound. But when you identify yourself with the para prakriti, the higher prakriti, that's a divine mother, full of force and consciousness. Okay? This higher Purusha is a real man. The normal man, with his body, life, and mind, is not the whole or the real man. We have to become the divine man, Purusha, possessing Prakriti fully at all the levels. This is Ramdo's take on what he has to say. Okay. Now, if you want, we can go to each sentence, and otherwise, if you've got the basic idea, we can go on to the next. But if you'd like to, we'll go to each sentence. You have to tell me.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Regarding the inversion, conversion of energy, even perversion.
Yes.
Now, is it the Prakriti which gets perverted and creates hostile forces?
Yes, that's right. And that happens quite at a high level, because when the one divides himself into the two, there are two. There is Diti and there is Aditi. Aditi is the one which is the creating the oneness, and Diti is the one which is creating the divisions. And when divisions come, then there is limitation. And when limitations come, perversions and opposites come. Okay. So it's very, very systematic if you go. So Aditi is the creator of the gods. She is the mother of all the gods. And Diti is the mother of all the asuras. Because what is an asura? Nothing. It is the sense of division, the sense of separateness. Whereas the whole universe is actually one. So, and why does it do that? Because it wants to express itself infinitely. And when you want to express yourself infinitely, the opposites also have to come into the existence. And when we are thinking of the oppositions, we are giving it a negative connotation. But the divine doesn't give it a negative connotation. This is a possibility. Okay? So we have discussed this many times, and you have to relate it to the same things, like light and darkness. Okay, light reducing itself becomes darkness. Okay, so that's what you have to see. So the one and the many produces also the oppositions and perversions. Okay, gentleness becomes harshness. Okay, one becomes yeah, beauty becomes ugliness. This is the perversion.
Rangada, can I ask you the controlling the lower prakriti and the para prakriti? Would you tell us a little more about the relation, the controlling body, mind, life, and the higher, the para prakriti? How can that be?
When you are identified with the body, mind, life, you are in the lower prakriti, right? You are identified with your body, mind, life, and you think that the lower prakriti is your body, mind, life, matter, life, and mind. And you think that you are in control. Actually, you are not in control. The thinking that you are in control is because of the ego, your sense of separateness. But that's an illusion. It's absolutely an illusion. Then when you lose your identification with body, mind, life and go to the middle level, you realize that you have no power at all and it is going on mechanically doing what it wants. Then the Purusha and Prakriti separate themselves. At the lower level, when you are identified with your body, mind, life, you are the soul which thinks that it is the body, mind, life. So there's a identification in ignorance. Your Purusha and Prakriti are identified at the lower level, but in ignorance. Okay? Then when you go to the middle, the spiritual planes of consciousness, you realize that there is no identification. You are pure consciousness and your body, mind, life is Prakriti, and there's no connection between the two. Then as I told you, as you keep going slightly higher and higher, first you realize that there is a small connection. Then you realize that there is a connection, you can have a little bit of power, and that power goes on increasing. You can even in the spiritual planes of consciousness, some amount of power is there, but not full. Okay? But continues right up to the overmind level where you have power. But there is a difference between spirit and matter. God and the world seem to be two different things. When finally you go to the supramental level only, then you realize that they are really one. There is no difference between the two. Okay? So that's what. And so, which is force
Can I
at the lower. Yeah,
ask
tell me.
a question, please? You know, in last month's Mother India, Mother
Ah,
has written a little essay on the ladder of consciousness. And
okay.
she says that in this ladder of evolution, each
Hmm.
avatar or an exceptional being comes and adds one more rung to that ladder.
That's
And
right.
she said, at the present, our main aim is the supramental. But
Okay,
she
that's right.
says there are many other ranges beyond that, but we are not concerned with that now. We are only
That,
concerned with supramental. That
that's
means there are other things beyond the supramental which we cannot even imagine. So, has
right.
Mother ever told you all anything about those planes
No,
beyond the supramental?
beyond the supramental, nobody, even if you go, you can't come back to give a report. That's why nothing is known about it yet. It's like,
No, but Mother knew about it. But she says we are not concerned with that for the time being. It's only supramental on earth, which was the aim.
yeah, because that is because what you have to do right now, we have to concentrate on that. And then we have
Yeah.
to go to the level of consciousness, and that is the supermind. And that's what
But
Mother was doing.
but in her evening classes or any other time, she has never spoken of anything going beyond the supramental.
There, Srivna has spoken about it, and he says that yes, there are planes of consciousness above, but we can't come back to give a report. Nothing is known about it. Only when it's like a staircase, okay? Suppose
Yeah, a
you
ladder, correct.
a ladder. So right now, the ladder has gone up to the first floor,
Supramental.
second, and maybe second, third floor. But now we are busy building this staircase to the fourth floor. This is supermind. But beyond that, the staircase is not yet built. But once the staircase is built up to the fourth supermind, then it is possible for human beings to create a staircase beyond that. So after the supramental becomes a reality in the physical world, one can talk and think and do things about the next level. But right now it is no point in doing that because we don't have access to it. Okay. Jasmine?
Yes, yes. Yes, please, I understood.
Yeah, that's right. So that is what Mother is saying. That there is a ladder. And so who created the first ladder was It was Ram who created the first one. He took it to the moral level. Then Sri Krishna brought it to the spiritual level. And now, and every time this evolution takes place from one place to another, Sri Krishna says there is an avatar who does that work. And now, by his own definition, he is an avatar because he is taking it to the next level of the supermind. And that is, he is establishing the supermind in the physical universe. So that is his definition. But these you have to understand in a very wide manner and not in a narrow manner, because he's saying that Christ is an avatar, and he says that Ramakrishna himself declared himself to be an avatar. Okay, so we have to understand all this by a little flexibly. If we have a rigid mind, then it becomes difficult to understand. But he does say that Sri Krishna established the spiritual plane of consciousness, and Rama is the one who established the moral principle. Okay? Before that, there were avatars who took it from matter to life and from life to mind. There were many, and those avatars are what we understand by the Dashavatar. No? We have first of all the boar, and then the fish. These are all symbolic of the evolution from matter, from life. Even there's an avatar who does that. But that avatar is apparently not spiritual, but it is still the lower level.
Was Buddha an avatar?
Yes, definitely. Yes. But as I said, what did he do? What was he? So it is not that every avatar has to take you to the next level. By the way, who is an avatar? An avatar is a human being born in the human way, biologically, but whose highest consciousness is divine. But they have a body-mind life. This is an avatar. The divine himself is not an avatar. He is the one who comes down. He is avataranam means coming down. So he is coming down into the physical world. That's the difference. But now the avatar is the one who goes upwards. He is the one who is going upwards. Okay? So
Yes, thank you.
okay. Sunki, you asked about the lower avatar, lower prakriti and the higher prakriti. Is the idea
Yes.
clear? Okay.
Yes,
At
I
the
got
lower level, yeah, it is a divine consciousness. It's a divine force which seems to be mechanical and unconscious. But as you go to the higher levels of, say, first floor, second floor, third floor, fourth floor, you realize that you were seeing it in the wrong way. That actually it is a force which is fully conscious of itself. Your problem was you are not seeing it as a divine force. But as you rise in consciousness, you see that it is always conscious of itself. And it is acting from behind the scene. Okay? It's like this, he gives an example also of, take the example of an animal. Okay? It does the right thing, but without consciousness. It flies down south to warmer climates when the winter sets in. It goes 4,000, 5,000 miles it flies, the bird. Okay. Now, how can that be without consciousness? But it is doing it mechanically because it's instinct. The instinct is nothing but the consciousness behind the mechanical force. So take the plant. Okay. It knows that it has to exist by taking water from the ground. And so the roots are built in such a way that it senses water and goes and gets water. And also above, it senses the light and goes towards the light. Okay. So this is where consciousness is there. We don't see it, but that doesn't mean it is not there. It is very much there. So when we go to the higher level of consciousness and improve our instruments of knowledge, then we can see the divine consciousness everywhere, even in the physical world. That is what he's saying, basically. That's a difference between the... Yeah, tell me.
Then Rangada, can you say like the higher prakriti, the para prakriti starts to come at some level, or we can find the para prakriti even in the lower level. Can you say that way?
I think you can see that it depends on the individual. Okay, even at the below the supermind level, you can get glimpses of that. It's possible. So I think, Sunki, what you're asking is that at any level, can we see the divine in the physical world? Is that what you're asking?
Mm, my question is more about the distinction between the lower nature and the higher nature. So,
Yeah.
As our consciousness progress, at some point,
Yes.
the paraprakriti starts to be more clear, you know. So I'm just wondering about the mechanism, or is there some sort of a stage or the thing that we can know this is paraprakriti, or there's just some stage where the development of nature in which we can find some appearance of prakriti in us. I'm not sure. Yeah, my question is a little complex.
Okay. Remember, there is a gradation of consciousness.
Yes.
So
yes.
it's like a staircase. Every time you climb one stair up, okay, your power increases and your consciousness also increases. Okay. So remember that. So
yes.
There is no particular stage at which you realize that lower prakriti and para prakriti are the same. Okay. There's no particular, it depends also individual also and how open he is and at which level of the staircase he is actually standing. It depends on that.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
Hello.
Okay. So,
A
yes, tell
thought
me.
just came to my mind. A thought just came to my mind. Now,
Go ahead.
supposing you are a teacher in knowledge, you have been through the ashram school, so you know all
Okay.
the levels from kindergarten to knowledge. But now you are a teacher of knowledge. So you have
Okay.
all the knowledge. Okay. Now, tomorrow, you don't teach in knowledge, but you have to go to kindergarten and teach. So now you're coming down to the level of learning ABCD. You are coming
Okay.
to a totally low level, although you have a bhandar of knowledge. But what are you doing? You come to such a lower level and you are teaching that. But that
Okay.
doesn't mean, so that is the prakriti, which is like your knowledge at the knowledge level also and at kindergarten level also.
Yes.
So the prakriti at kindergarten level is at a very low level of knowledge.
That's right.
But the Purusha, who is a teacher in knowledge, has everything, but still has to come down to the kindergarten level and teach the basics.
That's exactly what the divine is doing. From the
Yeah,
higher,
yeah.
yeah, he's coming down. That's right.
So I don't know if that answers Sunki's answer, how the prakriti is there at knowledge level also, and it is at kindergarten level also.
Absolutely.
But the levels are different.
That's right. At the kindergarten level, the Prakriti is mechanical and unconscious. Seems to be. But at the higher level, it is fully conscious and not mechanical. It is self-imposed. It becomes fully conscious power. That's right. Okay?
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we have to think a lot and make things clear. So, how much time do we have? We have about 7-8 minutes. Maybe we can read the next one. The individual being. Jasmine, will you read?
Yes, please.
Okay, go ahead.
This individual being of ours is that by which Ignorance is possible to self-conscious mind, but it is also that by which liberation into the spiritual being is possible and the enjoyment of divine immortality. It is not the eternal in his transcendence or in his cosmic being who arrives at this immortality. It is the individual who rises into self-knowledge. In him it is possessed and by him it is made effective. All life, spiritual, mental or material, is the play of the soul with the possibilities of its nature. For without this play, there can be no self expression and no relative self experience. Even then, in our realization of all as our large self and in our oneness with God and other beings, this play can and must persist unless we desire to cease from all self expression and all but a tranced and absorbed self experience. But then it is the individual being that this trance or this liberated play is realized. The trance in this mental being's immersion in the soul experience of unity. The liberated play is the taking up of his mind into the spiritual being for the free realization and delight of oneness. For, for the nature of the divine existence is to possess always its unity, but to possess it also in an infinite experience from many standpoints, on many planes, through many conscious powers or selves of itself, individualities in our limited intellectual language of the one conscious being. Each one of us is one of these individualities. To stand away from God is limited ego. Limited mind is to stand away from ourselves, to be unpossessed of our true individuality, to be the apparent and not the real individual. It is our power of ignorance. To be taken up into the divine being and be aware of our spiritual, infinite and universal consciousness as that in which we now live is to possess our supreme and integral self, our true individuality. It is our power of self-knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a long one, and I can do one thing. I'll just read out the summary, and we will go through next time. We'll go through in detail because it's quite a few things to be seen. Okay. Basically, the same thing is going on, telling in different words. Okay. So I'm reading out the summary, and then next time we will go more into a detail of all these things. So, 1 second. Yeah. Man has a soul and a self, which is his infinite real person. The body mind life is not a real person. He is dwelling the upper hemisphere of oneness and knowledge. With our body mind life, we can't go to the higher levels. Okay, this is very interesting. Okay, you can go, you can bring the consciousness down into your body mind life, but until now, nobody has been able to go to the higher consciousness with his body mind life. This is the story of Trishanku. Okay, he wanted to go to heaven with his body, but then it was not possible. So he went to each one by one by one. He went to many rishis, and they all said not possible. But one said, "Okay, I'll try," and he put him. But then he could not reach the highest level, and he is hanging in the middle. Okay, that's the story of Trishanku. So it's a symbolic story saying that nobody can go to the, but it should be possible when the supermind becomes a reality. Even your body will participate in the spiritual consciousness. I'm reading out what he's saying. Man has a soul and self, which is his infinite real person. These allow the dwelling in the upper hemisphere of oneness and knowledge. Man also has an individual being of body, life, and mind, which is his outer nature and lower nature. it is only a transient appearance. Your body, mind, life can disappear at the end of life. This lower being allows the consciousness to dwell in the lower hemisphere of multiplicity and ignorance. Your body, mind, life allows you to live in the lower. Okay? If you don't have a body, mind, life, you can't come down to the physical world. If you want to be in the physical world with your soul, you have to take birth in a body. Okay? That's what he's saying. That allows you. So it's got a power. Okay? And that's what he'll tell you later on. But the lower nature is also capable of liberation by rising into the higher hemisphere. It is not the eternal divine consciousness that is liberated, because that is always free. It's an individual soul who is liberated. The individual soul in the ignorance that is liberated by rising into the higher hemisphere. On all the planes of existence, there is the interplay of Purusha and Prakriti. Okay? Constantly they are exchanging glances. In Savitri also he says that. Okay? Purusha and Prakriti are at every level of consciousness, there's an exchange of their eyes and there's a relation. Each plane of consciousness can be defined by the relation between Purusha and Prakriti, soul and nature. Even when God is realized, the play of Purusha and Prakriti can and must persist unless, like the ascetic renunciate, man chooses to ignore the lower hemisphere and prefers the absolute oneness of the higher hemisphere. Then there is only an absorbed trance. When you, even when you are in the body and you escape from the body, mind, life, your body is in trance. The body is not aware of the physical world. The nature of the divine always insists on the possession of unity. That means you must have both. The higher and the lower must be there. Unity. But it also wants possession of unity in the many, in the infinite experience of all variations of colors, moods, events. Many different standards. What Shri is saying is that one can have a spiritual consciousness, but the body may go to sleep. This is the samadhi. But you can have a waking samadhi. That means you have a unity of the lower and the higher. When I am in the lower and I am fully aware of my condition in the physical world, I am seeing everybody and I recognize every one of them. But my consciousness is stationed in the higher level. Okay? This is the waking samadhi, and that's what Srila wants. But he doesn't want it at the spiritual level. He wants it at the supramental level. That's what he's saying. The nature of the divine always insists on the possession of unity, but it also wants possession of unity in the many, while in the body, mind, life, in the infinite experience of all variations of colors, moods, events, many different standpoints. Each individual is unique and has a variable, peculiar point of view. To fix oneself in ego, in limitation, is to distance oneself from God. You go away from God when you fix yourself in the body, mind, life. The state of ignorance means non-possession of unity. This is the power of ignorance, seeing only the many. Okay? Now that's interesting. So there is the word power. So what is ignorance? It's a power of knowledge to reduce itself on purpose. That light which reduces itself by its own force and will and becomes darkness. This is what the divine is doing. And why is he doing that? To have the experience of himself, all the possible experiences of himself, even in the opposite. Perversions and conversions and inversions. To fix and see oneness, even in the lower hemisphere of the many, is the power of self-knowledge and discovery of our true interior self, our true individuality. This is what we say. Next time, we can go through each line and see what we say. Okay?
Merci beaucoup.
Okay. Au revoir, everybody.